Hello, everyone. My name is Andy Murphy. I'm one of the co-founders of Zaina Lodge, and today I'd like to bring you the story of Zaina. This is a presentation I normally would have given on a busy Saturday night at the lodge to our guests, and we always had great reactions to the conversation, and we realized there's so many of you out there, friends, family, and others, who have never had a chance to have a Zaina experience, so we thought we could bring Zaina to you through this presentation. So we're going to see how it goes. Now, normally, I'd be doing this presentation from here, from the deck by the pool, after everyone had finished dinner. Usually I would do this with a club beer in hand and guests would have drinks or whatever they wanted to relax. But we all had just enjoyed a beautiful Zaina sunset. This is actually a great shot of the infinity pool. I'll show you more shots of the lodge later. This is really going to be several conversations. One is the story of Zaina and the thought process that went into creating Zaina. It's going to be a bit about my own personal story and my co-founder John Mason's story. But also a story of kind of startup adventures in Ghana. But let's first create some context. Normally people would be at Zaina, so they would know where it is. But for the rest of you, let's start with where Ghana is. Ghana is in West Africa. You can see it here in the circle, located in West Africa, about the size of the US state of Oregon on its side. Surrounded by former French colonies, French-speaking countries with Cote d'Ivoire in the west, Burkina in the north, and Togo on the east, and then obviously bordered by the Atlantic Ocean and just above the equator as well. And we are located in Mole National Park, which is the largest national park in Ghana. It's up here in the north. For folks who are familiar with US parks, Mole is bigger than Grand Canyon National Park and slightly smaller than Everglades National Park. The only national park in the continental US that's bigger than Mole, aside from Everglades, is Yellowstone. Of course, the parks in Alaska are a bit bigger, but Mole is a pretty big park, 5,477 square kilometers. This will feature into the story later, but I actually was a Peace Corps volunteer up here in the Upper East. You can see the White Volta River here that makes the boundary of the Boku West District. So I was a Peace Corps volunteer for 3 years, also lived in Bolga and Accra. So that gives you a sense of where Mole is. As part of this conversation, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the park as well, so we will get to that. But first, as I said, this is a lot of different stories. This is a story of the creation of Zaina. This is a shot of the grassy hillside where Zaina Lodge now stands. Actually, that pool deck shot that you saw is sitting right where these folks are walking. That's actually Issa, one of our original guides, and Douglas, our first deputy manager, who helped us set up Zaina. This is us walking that hillside in 2012 when we were trying to start Zaina. So then also a story of perseverance. So this is the truck that left Accra in February of 2013 to start the Zaina construction. It was a Hyundai flatbed that we brought. You see there's a couple pieces of equipment on there. There's a big water tank, some student mattresses, and a cement mixer. And I think an important thing to know about Zaina is in many ways it was a handcrafted lodge. The only big equipment we used for Zaina was on the roadworks and to dig the water holes for the elephants. Everything else was pretty much done by hand and manual labor in collaboration with all of the communities around the southern end of the park. And it's also just a story about adventure. And this is one of my absolute favorite photos. This is a photo I took myself in 2018. You build something and you have a dream and you hope that magic will one day happen. And when the elephants started to come to every once in a while drink from the swimming pool, this was an amazing afternoon. We had some guests around, and this little guy would actually walk on what was the wheelchair access ramp onto the deck. Maybe we do this for about 2 weeks during the year in the dry season and just drink from the swimming pool. Absolutely magical experience to be a part of. And so it's one of the special things, and I'll talk a little bit later about the intimate elephant experience that we have at Zaina and also at Mole National Park, which I don't think many people really appreciate. So I said, this is also a story about my own personal journey. So let's just start there and then we'll work our way back to Zaina. So I first came to Ghana in 1998 as a US Peace Corps volunteer. I had actually been a change management consultant for Accenture for about 3 years and quickly realized that corporate consulting was not really in my interest area. I think I had been influenced by my time at Georgetown University with the Jesuits and a call to service, and just wasn't really feeling connected to the work I was doing. And, did the most logical thing is walked away from a very good paying job as a young man and joined Peace Corps. And the irony was within a week of being in Ghana that I met my then boss and then now current business partner, John Mason. They came to interview the business volunteers, and I was a business volunteer at the time, to place them in sites. And because I had been a consultant with Accenture, they said they had a pretty complicated project in northern Ghana. And this was the job description. They basically said, well, we're not going to let you choose where you're going to go. We're going to send you to the Upper East region of outside of Bolgatanga. I had no idea what that meant at the time. And here's your job. There's a bunch of elephants coming up and down the Red Volta River out of Burkina Faso and raiding farms in northern Ghana. So we want you to work with the communities and farmers to help sort that problem out. Number two, we think there's potential for tourism. So we'd like you to go and explore. And actually, this is a boat that I built with that budget to explore. This is actually on the White Volta River, which is heavily flooded as we are speaking. And my good friend and colleague at the time, George Agbongo, took this shot. You'll see George as well later. And then three, we think that there's a women's farming association in the community that was called the Banaba Women's Farming Association. And we'd like you to work with them to make a little bit more money. And the interesting thing is that tourism exploration that was part of this really was the beginning of the story that led to the creation of Zaina Lodge. Now, obviously, it took a long time from '98 until we finally opened in 2015 to get there. I had a fascinating experience. I learned, so my start in Ghana was on community-based engagement. This is a shot of me and actually all of the chiefs on both sides of both what was then the Bolgatanga district, now it's the Nabdam district, as well as the Boku West district, working with all of these chiefs whose farmers were getting impacted by farming. Now, you can see I had a pretty bad Peace Corps haircut at the time. I had to have a beard like I do now, except there's gray in it now because I wanted to look older then. But you see a couple of people in this picture. One is a good friend and colleague, Patrick Adjuwudu, who still does a lot of environmental research across Ghana. And then here's George, who was my counterpart in Peace Corps at the time, is now my best friend to this day. I'm actually going to be in Ghana a week from Saturday. And we're going to celebrate, I think, his 51st birthday. He's an old man. But he actually, aside from a little bit of gray hair, he does not look that much different. But I kind of cut my cloth in Ghana on community engagement. And that's kind of where I've stayed. And that helped to form, the bedrock for what became the thought process behind Zaina Lodge. Now, the other part of this equation is John Mason, who I mentioned earlier. Like I said, John Mason, I've gone through this evolution where he was my boss for the first 6 years in Ghana. I left, we'll talk about this later, to go to business school. And now he and I are co-partners and co-founders of Zaina, and we have our own company that's actually invested in Zaina. John is one of the craziest characters next to George Agbongo that I've ever met. John was born in northern Nigeria in Jos. His parents were missionaries. He's lived his entire life in West Africa, aside from undergrad and graduate school in Canada. And he's, the best way to describe John is he's about as close as you can get to a Nigerian in a white man's body. He's had a lot of adventures, but just one example of how crazy John is, as you see him here on a motorcycle. John once rode a motorcycle from Paris to Accra across the Sahara, which is not even something because of safety concerns you could do right now, but that's just what he did. But I think the more important factor of where John and I came together was John did his master's research on the impact of creating Mole National Park on the communities that used to be embedded inside the park. Eventually, when the park was created, communities were moved out. And one of the interesting conclusions that he had come to as part of that research is, in many ways, by creating the park, you created the poachers. And what I mean by that is the communities were very connected in those days, and still are, to the land in terms of their belief systems and others. And as you move those communities away from their lands and their beliefs, there was a disconnect that happened over time. And so over years, the park became seen as a source of resources for people to make money rather than something that was part of them. So what John did is he, including that research, ended up setting up an organization that was going to look at how do you find ways to create an economic justification for conservation. The organization was called the Nature Conservation Research Center. It's one of the first environmental NGOs in Ghana. And it was initially the idea of Dr. Jane Goodall, if you can believe that. Dr. Jane Goodall had given a talk in Ghana about conservation and was looking at that time at chimpanzee conservation in Ghana. And met up with John after one of those conversations, and they actually went and had a conversation under a mango tree. They actually squatted like primates would, and she had the idea of opening up the Jane Goodall Chimpanzee Research Institute in West Africa, located in Ghana, and had asked John to help her do that. So John went off and set up the organization, got a board of directors together. By the time he was ready, her international board had stopped her from expanding. So her part was not in, but John was there. So basically, NCRC was started with $20 under a mango tree. And at the time, with very little money, although John had organized the first ever Wildlife Awareness Week in Ghana in the mid-90s, the way you could actually have some impact was to use Peace Corps volunteers. And the idea was using community-based ecotourism. And back to that original conclusion from his research was, how do you find communities who had an indigenous belief system behind conservation and build with that and use tourism as a way? So one of the first places was a monkey sanctuary in the Volta region of Ghana that we'll talk about, and it eventually expanded. I came into Ghana probably in the middle of that experiment. John had worked for a few years before with other volunteers, but he and I connected. And I worked with him first for 3 years in the Red Volta on that issue, but then eventually started to help him scout out for other places to place volunteers. And he, in Peace Corps sense, bribed me my last year of Peace Corps. And what I mean by that is he needed help to try and get some money from USAID, which is the US government's development arm. And he brought me he was managing a project in Bolga at the time, so he brought me to his air-conditioned house, which one was a plus. Said that I would have all the food I wanted from his chef, and I had satellite TV. And so I spent about a week at his place. We knocked out this proposal. It eventually got funded. I had inserted a position in the proposal called the Northern Coordinator. So when it got funded, I basically funded myself to stay another 3 years in Ghana. So the first 3 years was Peace Corps. Second 3 years was to run this project. And this is our logo. It was called the Community-Based Ecotourism Project. And during this project, we worked with 14 destinations around Ghana to help promote community-based tourism. I was actually working with all the northern sites. So here you can see the Paga Crocodile Ponds, the Wachau Hippo Sanctuary, Sirigu Women of Pottery Art, the Tongo Hills and Tenzuk Shrine, and then a new site in Widnaba along the Red Volta that we are trying to promote. And we were basically just trying to help put these organizations on the map, help strengthen the community organizations that had created these tourism destinations, provide them some basic infrastructure like visitor centers, highway signs to advertise themselves, and toilets and things for their guests, some basic other marketing and advertisements, and then also some basic training in terms of hospitality skills. It was a fascinating experience. I'm going to tell you in a second about some of these places, but one of the things we learned during this time, and really what led to Zaina, was we actually had quite a bit of success. It was the first time someone had made a really serious investment in ecotourism in Ghana, and you'll see that many of those investments still stand today. If any of you have been to any of these sites, whether in the Volta region, like the Tafitomi Monkey Sanctuary, which was the first place John worked, or others, and you've seen the visitor centers there, or you've seen the road signs leading to them, especially in northern Ghana, folks who have been to Bolga, we put those up back in those days. In fact, all the northern signs George Agbango himself put up. But what we learned was that most of these destinations were never going to be anything better than backpacker destinations, and therefore not generate, one, a whole lot of resources for the communities, but two, generate really significant returns that could lead back into conservation. Unless you found a way to invest in high-end accommodation and bring the type of people who had the money to spend and the money to invest in these areas. And that's really where the idea from Zaina came from. Zaina was really John Mason's original idea. I kind of jumped on because we in many ways built Zaina off of the foundation of the relationships that he had said. But I want to give you an overview of some of these places we work with, because my dream one day is that we could bring Zainas to some of these communities. The first is the Boabeng Fiamma Monkey Sanctuary, which is Ghana's oldest community-run sanctuary. I believe by now it's about 40 years old or more, not quite sure. They have both Mona monkeys that you see pictured here, but they're also one of the best places in the world to see black and white colobus monkeys. These sometimes you'll see them in zoos. I know the Philadelphia Zoo has them. The black and white colobus is a fantastically beautiful, beautiful monkey. Very beautiful old forest grove that you can walk through and see the monkeys. And the monkeys are seen as sacred. So they're protected. They're running around the community. There's actually a cemetery where they bury the monkeys, and there's a priest whose job it is to do that. So when you visit Boabeng Fiamma, you can actually see the graveyard of the monkeys that have passed away over the years and those efforts. A really, really special place. One of my personal favorites, and this is in Bolga, near Bolga in Sirigu, the Sirigu Women of Pottery Art. In Sirigu, they had the traditional practice of decorating the houses that was kind of dying out. And this woman at the top here, who is a very personal friend and one of my aunties and grandmothers in Ghana, Melanie Kasisi, she is a force to be reckoned with. I believe to this day, she's still driving her 4x4 around Bolga. Melanie had been basically owed her career, in her words, to her mother supporting her. Her mother was a pottery maker and would walk about, can't remember the distance, about 18 kilometers every 3 days to sell pottery in the Navrongo market from Sirigu and help put Melanie through school. Melanie eventually rose up to be the head of Catholic schools for all of the Upper East. And when she retired, she wanted to give back because this art of house decoration was starting to die out. So she started the Sirigu Women of Pottery and Art. And they did a lot of different things, got young girls and women in the community more interested in this art, but also started to launch new products like these canvas paintings you see, where they started to apply canvas and colors and using the decorations and the symbols from Sirigu, and every single one of these symbols has meaning, onto canvas. And what was interesting is now there's about 3 or 4 different genres of this artwork as the artists have really grown. At one point in 2002, when they had refurbished the Golden Tulip Hotel in Accra, we had one of these paintings hanging in every single room at the Golden Tulip. And to this day, if you go to the swimming pool at Golden Tulip and you look at the restaurant, towards the restaurant from the pool, you'll see the whole sidewall outside painted in Sirigu designs. I worked with Melanie back in those days to get the women down to Accra for the first time ever for many of them to do that work. So I'm always happy when I go and see Golden Tulip in those days. A lot of people know Ghana for its slave forts and castles. We've got 2 UNESCO World Heritage castles on the coast. Ghana was a big focus for the year of return when it was 400 years. Some of you may be familiar with the 1619 project. So 2019 marked 400 years of the first enslaved person from Africa showing up in the Americas. And so there's a huge tourism draw of African Americans especially, but others as well, coming to visit Ghana to learn more about that history. But there's a lot of amazing sites actually in the rest of the country, because the story of slavery in Ghana is also the story of the roots that people came down from, because most people came from northern Ghana and the areas around what is that part of West Africa. So one of these sites is in Gwolu. This is the Gwolu slave defense wall. It's on a road between Tumu and Upper West and Wa in the Upper West. And essentially, the community of Gwolu had built a multi-meter high mud wall around themselves to protect themselves during the slave raiding days. Now, this was actually after the close of the transatlantic slave trade, but many people don't realize that slave trading and capturing was still going on well after the close of the Atlantic slave trade. So parts of this wall, this is important, are still standing to this very day. And this was a shot that I took probably in around 2001. Now, since then, we've worked with UNESCO, and this is actually covered to protect it from the elements, but a fascinating history there. Another interesting fact about Gwolu is it's the home of the former president Hilla Limam. At the time that I was there, his younger brother was the chief, also was a lawyer in Wa, and I worked with him to get a Peace Corps volunteer to work with this community. Another great one is the Paga crocodile ponds up near the border with Burkina. The people in Paga believe that their original ancestor was led to the area where Paga now is based by a crocodile. So crocodiles have always been sacred. They have several ponds where people can go out and have their picture taken with crocodiles squatting right next to them. They believe that their ancestors come back as crocodiles. And one of the amazing things about Paga is when you go there, you'll see kids swimming in the water, women washing clothes around the crocodiles, and there's a spiritual connection, and nothing ever happens to them. Another great site in the Upper East is and this is now the 3rd site I'm showing you in the Upper East, is the Tenzuk Shrine located in the Tongo Hills. One of the amazing features of Ghana is all these vibrant traditional festivals. So one of them is the Golub Festival, which takes place kind of on a lunar calendar, but always before the farming season. And what's interesting about what happens in the communities in the top of the hills is that they dress in traditional clothing like you see here for 30 days before the actual festival takes place. So this is a shot I took at the time. The gentleman in the center was the head assemblyman, which is a government local representation position at the time. He's now the chief of that entire area. Great story about assemblyman was in those days, we were trying to get a Peace Corps volunteer based at Tenzuk to work with them on their tourism enterprises. And so he would show up dressed like this because it was during the festival on his red Honda AG motorcycle, but he'd be wearing leather dress shoes and black socks, would pick me up in my Peace Corps kind of business type outfit and with my laptop bag, and we went off and lobbied the Bogatengra District Assembly at the time, now it's a municipal assembly, to get a Peace Corps volunteer, and I'm happy to say we did get a volunteer there, so that was an adventure. Tonga and Tenzuk is almost as close as you can come to a living embodiment of the Flintstones, and what I mean by that is you have these amazing traditional structures, houses, built in amongst these massive granite boulders that dot the hills. And so it's a really, truly special experience. And finally, we have the Wachau Hippo Sanctuary, is probably one of the most successful sanctuaries that John Mason helped to work with communities to form. We started in the late 90s, just before I came to Ghana with some other volunteers. And it's won multiple awards around the world, including the Equator Award. It's a 15-kilometer stretch of the Black Volta River on the Ghana side. That is a natural hippo breeding grounds. And so you have protected hippos again that the community believes is sacred. A beautiful thing about Calgary is they've now had an 18-year partnership with the Calgary Zoo. And so the Calgary Zoo and the CO at the time took an interest, his name was Alex Graham, took an interest in Wachow. And so when the Calgary Zoo opened their brand new hippo exhibit at that time, they dedicated it to the Wachow Hippo Sanctuary. They flew all of the chiefs, including this gentleman who is the paramount chief of Wachow, who is still the paramount chief to this day. He looks very much like he does in this shot. He hasn't aged. They flew them to Calgary in the winter. Imagine how cold that was. I had the opportunity actually over a year ago, I gave a talk on actually Zaina and entrepreneurship in Calgary last year, and I had the actually chance to go and visit the zoo and that exhibit for the first time. It's a special experience for me because they actually had pictures of these chiefs who were personal friends. And so it's just great to see how these partnerships can come out in the world as well. So that's it a bit about on tourism. What happened to me and what really led to Zaina was in 2004, through a Hail Mary pass back to a couple MBA programs, I happened to get into Harvard Business School, which is where I wanted to go. And what was happening at that time is I had lived in Ghana for 6 years. I was in danger of being the expat who could never leave. John Mason was hoping I would be his little mini-me and stay in Ghana. We were looking at potentially doing another phase of the community-based tourism project, but I needed to test my commitment to Ghana. I also knew that at some point, for the things that I wanted to do independently, I was going to need to get an MBA to take myself to the next level, but also that I would need a pretty strong brand. And that's really the idea behind Harvard. Is I knew I wanted to do my own stuff, and I knew people knew what that meant when you walked in the door. I ended up doing a joint degree. I did 2 masters in 3 years at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government as well. And what was interesting about that time is that I found anytime I had free thinking or free thought time, I kept turning to these challenges of how do you really promote Northern Ghana? How do you develop high-end tourism? First time I tried to tackle that problem was in a public-private partnerships class where I kind of created the first, what was a kind of a quasi collaboration across multiple organizations. But then what was interesting is that right around that time, in about 2000 and early 2006, the Ghana government was exploring what it would look like to have private hotel concessions in parks, because Ghana was one of the few African countries that didn't have concessions like you see in South Africa, Tanzania, and other places. John Mason was part of the group that was helping them do a best practices study to look across the continent to see what were some of the best practices in terms of concessions in Botswana and Kenya and others. It also worked out that at that time, there were some investors that were interested. So there was a particular investor who didn't end up becoming an investor in Zaina, but was interested in looking at Mole National Park. He paid for my expenses to go to Ghana the summer of 2006. I happened to also get some support from Harvard Business School's Social Enterprise Initiative, and I also got a grant, a science grant from the Kennedy School to do a feasibility study for what it would look like to do an eco lodge in the middle of Mole National Park. So I took that initial partnership brainstorming I had done, the work from that summer, and then later that year, I took an emerging markets real estate class, and I actually wrote the original business plan for Zaina as the final paper of that class. But it was one of those where there's the level of effort you can put in to get the grade, and then there's a level of effort you can use to try and impress investors. And so what I did was I put in an extra level of effort, and I mailed that off to John. Yes, mailed, actual mail. Later on, I did email it as well. And what also really helped was at that time, one of John's former board members at NCRC was a Ghanaian gentleman who was really connected in the finance world, who had also done his master's at the Kennedy School, and I met him during that time. And so that's really where the link came, because this gentleman saw the business plan, got excited, and we were a bit naive. We thought that we could raise the money for Zaina, or what became Zaina, in about 6 months. Turns out it took us 7 years. I had done a 1-year fellowship at Harvard Business School. At the World Wildlife Fund after business school, ended up being there 6.5 years while we raised the money, but we finally did raise the money. It was really coming out of just this interesting band of brothers who came together during this feasibility study. And what I love about this shot is several of the individuals here worked with us later on. The one with my hands around him was the lead tourism guide at Mole National Park at the time, James Brima. He's retired now, but is still a friend to this day. And then the gentleman on the left who looks like he wants to box someone is Zach. He's one of the leading guides now in the park. He's also one of their birding experts, and we work with him at Zaina Lodge to this very day. So it's interesting as you start to go through these adventures, the different people you collect into that journey and the role that they play, whether it's John Mason and my role with him in Peace Corps, George Agbongo as my counterpart, who at one point was one of our safari drivers, to someone like Zach as well. And that's really the story of relationships, is another side story as well. I'm going to pause a bit now and talk a little bit about why Mole National Park. So I told you about these communities we work with. Why Mole? Well, the reason why we wanted to start in Mole is it's the largest national park in Ghana. It is the main tourism attraction in the north. And as much as we wanted to go to a community destination, the reality is that the market wasn't quite ready. I mean, I think we were probably still even a little bit early with Zaina in terms of where the tourism market is in northern Ghana. But we wanted to help put tourism in northern Ghana on the map. There was one 50-year-old motel in the park run by the government. And so while that does serve the general budget traveler, we wanted something that was going to attract higher end people of means to come to northern Ghana, both Ghanaians, expat living in Ghana, people coming to Ghana in tourism, and also eventually bringing other people. But Mole is a very, very special place. It's got a whole rich diversity of species in terms of mammals, birds, and primates, but especially the elephants. And I'll come back to the elephants in a second. I love the different types of antelopes, and they're different from what people would have seen if you've been on safari in East or South Africa. So we have the Cobb, which is, for those who've been to East and South Africa, it's like the impala of West Africa. The Cobb, which is on the left here, these are females, are the most common antelope in the park. They need to live within 3 to 4 kilometers of a water source. So by creating the 2 water holes that we did for the elephants, we've actually helped to increase the population of the Cobb and therefore other animal species who rely on water, and hopefully eventually also the predator and carnivore population as well. On the right is my favorite type of antelope. This is a male water buck. I just love the majesty of their horns. You see they have much thicker coats. They tend to come to the water holes in the evenings and at night, but you'll see them in Mole all in the day. This is the harnessed bush buck, one of the more elusive guys, although still quite common compared to some of the smaller ones like the dikers. It's called a harnessed bush buck because of the stripes of the white patterns on its back. This is a male. For antelopes, one way you can always tell the antelopes, with the exception, I believe, of the hartebeest, is that the males have horns and the females don't. This is my absolute #1 favorite. This is a roan antelope, and it's hard to tell from this shot, but the roan antelope is as big as a horse, and they're very, very majestic. These horns are relatively small, so this is a younger male. An interesting story of Zaina is that these guys are pretty elusive, and we're not really coming that close when we first started, partly because there might have been some poaching pressure before we came, because in many ways by where we located Zaina, which is about 4 kilometers into the park from where the headquarters and the Mole Motel are located, is we actually pushed that boundary of where poachers could actually potentially operate a little bit further. And I have to say around poaching is that the wildlife staff and the rangers of the park are fantastic individuals. We have a great collaboration with them and the leadership of the park, and working with them to keep all of these people and species in the park protected. These are the hartebeests, and like I said, all of them have horns, male and female. They tend to be kind of a bit north from where Zaina is located, so we don't really see them around Zaina, but we can definitely see them in certain times of the year on safaris. They're not really that smart, so when you spook them in the car, they run alongside the road. So as long as you maintain the right pace, you can actually watch them for a while. The other thing is we don't have any fences at Zaina, so we have animals all over the place. So this is a warthog. This is actually the Zaina roadway. And what I love about this shot is you see a lot of young shea trees in the background, but we are very intentional about creating Zaina and leaving as many trees and plants as possible in place. So we used all the stone you see on the walkway is actually from the park. And we kept as many trees as possible. We tried to space the rooms to not cover up any existing wildlife pathways. So we get animals all the time, including these guys. And I want to take some time to talk about the elephants of Mole, because I believe that Mole National Park has one of the most intimate elephant experiences on the continent. Let me say it again. Mole National Park in Ghana has one of the most intimate elephant experiences on the continent. And this is a shot I took of elephants that were feeding on the trees and in Zaina near the rooms. One day I was walking backwards. This guy on the left was walking towards me. And what's interesting about Zaina is you've actually been doing, and Mole itself, is they've been doing walking safaris in this park for more than 50 years. And what's happened over that time frame is that the old bull elephants have gotten amazingly comfortable around human presence, both on foot and in vehicles. And what's happened over the years then is as the younger males come up and leave the family groups and leave their mothers, they join these bachelor herds, and they too get trained. And so we have 4 or 5 old bulls. They've actually named most of the elephants in the park that are around us all the time. One of those was that shot I showed you of the elephant at the water, at the swimming pool, but we get them all the time in groups. This one on the left is a younger guy, you can see. This is a defensive posture when somebody's a bit too close to them. Swimming in the water hole. It's a magic experience. If you may have seen elephants in zoos or maybe even being in safari in a vehicle, but it's nothing quite like seeing an elephant on foot for the first time. It's a bit intimidating, actually. They're amazing, majestic creatures. We actually installed camera traps so that we could get some interesting shots of them. But we also had other shots. You know, we got to see the olive baboons that are in the park, or the buffalo, which are really elusive. And you see that we have two different shades of kind of light brown and darker brown in Mull National Park. Baboons roaming to the water holes. You see in the distance one of the viewing hides that we put in so people could watch animals at the water hole and be protected. The cobs, this is a male cob during the day, are active, but also you see that the park and the water hole keeps going at night because a lot of animals are nocturnal. So this is a female water buck. You see them kind of running around. This is a male. You also see the bush buck as well coming out at night. Sometimes during the day, you got the warthogs. Now, see this warthog out in the distance on his knees. It's one of my favorite shots. So that's kind of how they eat. So when they're mowing the lawn and eating the grass, they get on their forepaws like that and mow. And it's one of the funniest things to see. And you really can't do much to disturb them when they're really focused on that. And then we got a lot of elephant selfies, you know, individual poses, group shots, sometimes really close-ups. This one allowed you to see the coarseness of the hairs and how deep the different wrinkles are on a trunk of an elephant, what their three-toed toenails look like. I mean, if you were this close to an elephant, you'd probably be about to die. Different types of shots. Now, what I love about this one is this was about the last photo this particular camera ever took. There were a couple more shots, and then that was it. And turns out I went down one morning, and that particular camera had been smashed to bits by this particular elephant. So I had to search through the grass to find the memory card and got this shot. And more importantly, this was my favorite ever wildlife experience. So I'm going to pause here. That is a hyena. And one thing I want to show you in the background is a skeleton of an animal. This was a water buck. So this shot you can see in the timestamp there was taken February 25th, 2017 in the evening. But that morning we had probably one of our best wildlife experiences ever at Zaina. In the morning we woke up and there was, looked like a leopard had killed a young female water buck right by the water hole. And the leopard couldn't have had better timing or placement than if I had paid him to do what he did. We know it was a leopard based on the way that the animal had been killed and some of the tracks and things like that. And so all of our guests, both in other parts of the park and ours, got to see this. And, you know, it was a great opportunity to tell the story of the circle of life and wildlife. And so what happened was around 1 in the afternoon that day, the vultures and such started to notice there was a carcass around there. So they started to come in and kind of do what vultures do. And they were taking turns between hiding in the shade by a bush by the water hole, going to the carcass and going to the water and drinking water. And what would happen is as the vultures were going to drink water, all the crocodiles in the water hole were lining up. Now we have crocodiles that moved in within 6 weeks of the first rains filling up the water holes. I don't know how they found them. They must have a spidey sense for where there's water. They sometimes kill antelope and other things. That's how they eat. But they were trying to get the vultures. So there was this amazing standoff. And by the end of the day, the vultures had picked a lot of that carcass pretty clean, and that's why you could see the ribs. And so I was curious to see what would happen that night because we have other scavengers like hyenas. So I took some of our camera traps and put them out there. And it was a pretty interesting experience because that weekend we were fully sold out. We had a Ghanaian woman who was celebrating her 50th birthday party. And we were up on the pool deck that night celebrating her birthday at the same time that the hyenas, at this very time when this picture was taken, were having a party with the carcass. And off they went all night long. And eventually you can see, this is a shot from, it's cut off about 4:47 or so in the morning. And the carcass is gone. It was actually dragged across the road. It was just completely dismantled. So just an amazing experience. It's a bit graphic, but it is what happens when you're out in the African savannah. Now I'm going to end with probably my favorite shot ever of wildlife. I didn't take this, got it from a friend. This is a full-grown python swallowing a young, what looks like probably female water buck. This is, you see the flooding, so it probably was taken sometime in mid to late September, early October. I mean, northern Ghana is fully flooded as I'm doing this recording, but you can see how much water is there. And what's amazing about the topography and the ecology of northern Ghana is you go from heavy rains and flooding in September, tons of insects in October, to complete dry, arid environment during the harmattan and the dry season where humidity will drop down to 10%. So it's one of the beauties of the changes, and you'll see this in other photos. So let's talk about Zaina. I've given you a lot of the background of the park, of John and I and what we were doing, but let's talk about the idea of Zaina. And the story I want to tell is is that in many ways, Zaina was a manifestation of the community engagement we had started in NCRC in the early days. This is a shot of our entire construction team. I zoomed in so you could see the faces. You would actually see about 80 people in this original shot. We gave the whole construction team Zaina shirts when construction ended. But what I love about this is the stories that it tells. So to the right, you'll see a gentleman with glasses. That's Alex Ayiti. He was the architect that designed, built, and managed the construction of Zaina. But Alex was also the lead architect we work with in the old community-based tourism days. So Alex helped us build the visitor centers. He designed those road signs that you see for the tourism sites in Ghana. So he was a long 20-year partnership, and he did a fantastic job. To the left, you'll see a woman with a headscarf on the very left. Her name was Aisha. She was part of the construction team, was one of the hardest working people on the team, male or female. She joined us as was part of our restaurant service team in the beginning, but then eventually left us to go pursue a degree in pharmacy. So we love to see people pursuing their education. We've done as much as we can to support our staff to go off and pursue further education when the opportunity came up. You also see a gentleman just to the right, north of me. His name is Suli. Suli was part of the construction team. He is working at Zaina to this day as one of the lead servers at our bar. He makes some fantastic cocktails and drinks and always puts a smile on guest's face. And there's many, many different staff at Zaina I could highlight, so I don't want to just single one person out, but this is just a good story to tell. The other thing is we wanted as much as possible to embody the local culture. And right outside of Mole National Park, about 6 kilometers from the main gate, is the community of Larabunga. And what's important about Larabunga is it's the home of one of the oldest mosques in West Africa. And so we wanted to try as much as possible reflect the traditional building style from the people around the park in Larabunga. So we brought the women from Larabunga to come in and do all of the decorations on all of the plastering and mud walls of Zaina, be it the main walls, the main building as well. Actually, you'll see later a shot of this shot to show how massive this wall is. They did the entire thing. Anytime we need repairs, they come to do it because we wanted as much as possible for Zaina to reflect the local style of the north, the area around the park, but also be as luxurious as possible and show you can actually mix culture, history, and luxury together into one seamless product. Another interesting story was the roofing. Zaina has all thatch roofs. Northern Ghana is known for thatch roofing, and depending on whether you're in the northern region, upper west, or upper east, there's lots of different styles. Because we needed a roof that could last between 15 and 20 years, we actually brought in a weaving style from Burkina Faso. So we brought in expert Burkina Bay thatchers to work with the local communities to do this work. And then for a roof to last that long, there's 3 key elements. One is you need the right thatching style. You need to have the right grass, and there's a very specific species that we had to acquire from all over northern Ghana, including even behind the Zinga National Park in Burkina. And then it's the slope. You see the angle that we have on all of our roofs allows the water to run off. And so what's interesting about this story is that the expert team led we have 25 rooms at Zaina, so the expert team led the roofing of the first 13 rooms at Zaina, as well as the main building, and I'll show you a shot of that in a second. But for the other 12 rooms, as well as eventually we did a meeting room in the same style, the local community folks who are actually both community members and Fulanis from outside the community of Magnori, who did that work. And we used 7,000 bundles of grass to roof all of Zaina. This is that shot I was referring to. So this shows you during construction. There's a lot of things going on in this shot. It's one of my favorite of the construction days. But the first thing is you'll notice at the very top, there's a bunch of small folks up there leading the roofing of that huge super main building. And just to give you a sense, I mean, that was a pretty awesome feat because they're way high up there in general, but they're also on a ridge. So they're really way up there. You see to the right of the main building is we hadn't yet roofed or put the tents up for the second wing of tents at Zaina. So that's, you see the roofing structure all done out of teak. So all the wood at Zaina is made from teak from smallholder plantations from across Ghana. It was interesting that it was more difficult to carry legal timber across Ghana than it seems for people to carry illegal timber. That's a whole nother story, but we bought a lot of timber from local smallholder plantations and a lot of people who had been told to plant teak and had never been able to make any money. So we were able to at least put some money in their pockets. But the other thing I like about this shot is it shows the elephants in the water because, we built these water holes. We first dug them at the end of 2013, and then that next rainy season they filled up with water, but you don't really know whether elephants are going to come to use them. And when the first time they did, not in this shot, but not too long before this shot, it was just an amazing experience to see. We're now one of the better places in the park to see the elephants. There's also a couple good water holes and older water holes near the Mole Motel and the park headquarters as well. This shows you a shot of all of Zaina. So from end to end, you see from the left to the right, is about 1 kilometer. We follow the ridge line. So the entire park, you're just looking out from Zaina into nothing but unending savanna wilderness. There's nothing in front of us for miles and miles and miles. The infinity pool in the middle in the main building. You'll notice that the roofs to the right look a little lighter. That's because they had been done before a rainy season. So the ones on the left had been done and gone through a rainy season, so the grass gets darker. You can see in the very top there some green looking structures. That's our back of house. So my house was way up here where I live. So my biggest challenge in walking to our morning meeting every day was actually dodging elephants, which was always a bit fun, and I do miss it. You can also see that this was taken probably in the dry season. So the green dots are the trees, but it's relatively dry this time of year. This is actually a shot of Zaina taken as a still from Mr. Easy's Skin Tight video. I mean, one of the ways we help put ourselves on the map is the Nigerian artist Mr. Easy filmed one of his first videos at Zaina. At that time, his song Skin Tight was hugely popular. He brought in the well-known Ghanaian artist, the Efya, to come and join him on that collaboration. They did the video. And it's one of the things among many that we did to help put ourselves on the map in those early days. This shows you, I mean, one of my labors of love was the pool. So I just love this shot for the contrast of how beautiful the pool is. The waterfall sound that it makes adds this nice vibe to the main lodge. But you can also see how dry it can get relative. If you remember that python shot and the flooding, how dry it can get in the middle of the dry season as well. And this just shows you a shot of the lodge as well. I want to talk a bit about just some of the aspects that we designed, because just about everything at Zaina was intentional in one way or shape or other. Even this picture you're looking at is kind of an upward shot of the main wall that you saw the women decorating. Again, this is the central feature of the main building. It architecturally has a reason. It supports the entire roof, but it also just is this amazing decorative piece that also blocks people from seeing the pool and the view when they first come in. So we kind of tease out some of the amazing wows of first arriving at Zaina. One of the first things we did was create this amazing walkway, and the walkway was very intentional. And the idea is you walk out of the vehicle that you've come in, and you're walking into the world of Zaina. And the idea is as you're making that transition, you know, we want you to leave behind whatever you've been through, whether it's a long travel day, stress of work and other things, and come into the world of Zaina. So you walk through this beautiful archway that's good either in the daytime or the nighttime. It's beautiful. You know, you're surrounded by this local architecture that we've done and these amazing styles, and you walk into the main building that we call the cathedral. This is what people first see. The swimming pool is behind there. And what we found is that if you get this entry experience right, of people first seeing the walls of Zaina, getting out of the car and getting the waving welcome from our staff, getting a welcoming drink from our staff as well, and walking around the wall, seeing the swimming pool. And if everything is done well, we'll have elephants at the water holes as well. And it's just this amazing experience, you know, this pool, this view. And if we get that right, we found that people will forgive a lot of other service mistakes later, because it's just you're capturing people. And it's something we've almost come to count on, you know, and we're very deliberate in how we even design the entire drive into the lodge to create the effect. Now later on, you know, we've got the Z Bar, one of my favorite experiences at night. Prior to dinner, after the safaris, you know, we run a safari lodge, so you have morning safari activities, and later, this is a shot you can see taken by Steve Abibio, who is another person that helped put Zaina on the map with his amazing nighttime and other shots of Zaina in those days. And this is our original opening staff. We've had a lot of people move in and out on the days, but when you come into Zaina, the staff will come out waving to you and welcoming you. Because the idea is when you come to Zaina, is we want you to feel like you're part of the family. The intent for us is by the time you leave Zaina, you should feel like you're leaving old friends behind. So we don't have a reservations counter. We have couches that you sit on, and we sit with you like you're in our living room, and we welcome you with a welcome drink. This one is called Lemon Yummy, which is a kind of a lemonade that's a bit tart and sweet at the same time, served in local calabashes. We'll give you a cold towel to help cool yourself off with as well. You'll notice the spear wall, which seems like a decorative piece, but this is actually an homage to the Gonjas, who are the dominant tribe around the entire outside of the park. Actually, they're the lead tribe of what's now the Savannah region where Zaina is located. It was carved out of the northern region. The Gonjas were a warrior tribe, and so they're one of the greatest symbols is their founder on horseback with a spear. So we did this spear wall as an homage to the Gonjas. And also, it was quite intentional because the Kamaras, the people of Larabanga, where the mosque is located, were traditionally the spiritual advisors to the Gonjas. And so in many ways, we kind of took the symbols of the spiritual advisors and the decorations of Zaina, but wanted to make sure that we were giving due deference to the Gonjas themselves. And before we opened, we invited both the chief imam from Larabanga to come to Zaina and see the site, and actually gave a blessing before we even opened and started the construction. He had never been inside the park before we had done that. We also brought the Basunawura, the head chief and the landowner from those areas, to bless Zaina at the beginning as well. So that was a fantastic experience. But we also wanted to, as much as possible, reflect local art as well. So our eventual gift shop, this was a shop before the gift shop was open, which is behind the glass. You see, we're storing things at the time. We actually brought the people from Sirgu, as you see, to come in and design the outside of the entrance to our gift shop. We use local cloths like mud cloth from Burkina, indigo fabrics, baskets up there from Bolga as well, because we, as much as possible, wanted to reflect not just the culture and styles from around the park, but to really bring in the spirit of West Africa, northern West Africa. So northern Ghana, Burkina, those areas, into everything we did. You know, everything from just grass-themed baskets. And the rooms, you know, the rooms are not, we're a tented safari lodge, but this is not your father's tent if you've ever been camping. We have some of the most luxurious hotel rooms in all of Ghana, and some of the best beds as well. And most of our guests, if you read our TripAdvisor reviews, will rave about the beds. I miss them myself. So it's a large tent under a grass awning, and the idea behind that is that it gets really hot. Into the 42 degrees Celsius, so that's about 104, 105 degrees in the hot season in April. So we want to do what we could to keep the rooms cool. Really a lot of space. This is what the inside of the rooms look like. And it's a tent that's up against a wall where we have a bathroom behind that. So we actually have a tent and a fixed bathroom structure. And in the bathroom, you can look up and see the entire thatch roof above it. And we have both an indoor and an outdoor shower as well. Plenty of room, satellite TV. The room is well insulated and air conditioned, so it's quite cool, but there's also a mahogany fan. And every single room has an amazing balcony as well that looks out over the water holes. And every room has a different artistic design. So you see this other picture had some different wood reliefs of geckos. All the background decorations were supplied by Wild Gecko and Accra, whom is a good friend. I love what she and Kingsley did for us in terms of the art for Zaina. At the time, you notice these beds were designed by Pergamon, who I believe is out of business, but Faisal and his team did an amazing job designing all of the furniture in Zaina, from the Lobi-style stools at the end of the beds to our Malian-style TV cabinets to the desks. Everything was designed and built locally in Ghana as well. This is one of my favorite shots. This was a shot of an elephant who had taken a dump outside of a guest's room in the night. This shows you how big that is. I often give a presentation on Zaina at my daughter's schools when they were in first grade. So I am now famous at Claremont Elementary School. I still get parents who remember their kids talking about the guy with the poop photo. So anyway, this is one part of the experience of being near wildlife. Some of the best experience I've had when my daughters would come and stay with me, and I'll show you their shots later, was being in their rooms when an elephant was feeding right outside the balcony, just getting to watch quietly and witness. The rooms, all of the bathrooms in the rooms are, again, we're still incorporating the stone from the park. His and her sinks as well. Mirrors that were designed for us by Wild Gecko and Accra. One of the key stories of northern Ghana is the shea nut and shea butter. And so what we chose to do is make sure that all of the soaps and body products were produced locally in northern Ghana, but also made out of shea. So this is black and white soap. It's actually a lemongrass soap made by Tama, which is a company based in Tamale. So all of our shampoos, body wash as well are made by them. It's one of the things I also miss. We even took, local teak wood shavings from the building of the Zaina and other calabash to really make it a nice local experience. I'm going to end with talking about kind of one of the final elements. There's, I think, what I would always describe as 3 key pillars to what makes Zaina amazing. One is obviously the beautiful destination and the love that we put into crafting this lodge that I think I focused most of this talk on. The other that I didn't spend as much time on is the food experience at Zaina. We knew that the food experience had to be amazing. I could do a separate talk on the wonderful chefs that have helped us to establish Zaina, and Chef David, who's running the show now. I'll do that at another time. Because that's a bedrock of Zaina. And then the third is the safari experience. And we wouldn't be anywhere without the amazing team that's helped us both in the beginning and to this very day at Zaina. In this shot, you see a couple different stories. So this is Boat and Boachi on the left, and then Emmanuel Dankwa and Zach on the right. Now, Zach, you've already seen. Zach was in that photo in 2006 when I did my feasibility study for putting a lodge in Mole. And Zach today has been the lead guide for the rangers that are assigned to us. Now we have a special collaboration with Mole National Park. And one of the rules in Mole is that you cannot be out in the park without an armed wildlife division staff. So we quickly created a new model within Mole where the wildlife rangers under the Forestry Commission, our own Zaina guides would work together to lead safaris and create a special experience. The gentleman next to Zach with his hand up on the car is Emmanuel Dankwa. He's our lead ranger. Emmanuel grew up in the park. His father was a wildlife ranger in Mole. So he's been in this park for his entire life. His brother Albert also worked with us as well. His other brothers are involved in tourism. And so he's really brought a special vibe and is a very knowledgeable individual for us. On the left are two gentlemen who are no longer with us, but these guys were Bode and Boachi. They were the original drivers during the construction of Zaina. And when we were starting to try and build our teams, these two guys joined us to help us get started. And they were an amazing part of the team. They've both gone on to do other things as well, but we appreciate the role that they played in helping to establish Zaina and to get us on the map. Another special experience we did was we brought in a wildlife expert from South Africa. The gentleman against the termite mound here is Michel Jardine. He was one time the operations director for Sabi Sabi in South Africa outside of Kruger National Park. We brought Michel in to provide a training for both our own guide staff, but also the wildlife rangers themselves. Actually, this gentleman here was Farouk, who was the park manager at the time we started Zaina, and help us to create a really special feel and really get the team gelled together. It was one of the special times of the early training days that Zaina was working with Michel. I'm still in touch with him to this day. You see Zach here as well, and then some of the other folks. And this was actually a day of, when you're out on safari and it's a slow day and you're not seeing a lot of animals, there's so many other stories you can tell. So this was about how you can interpret the amazing attributes of a termite mound, which is, even though it's a mound, it actually qualifies in and of itself as a living structure. And then finally, I can't do a presentation on Zaina without talking about this gentleman. This is Isa. Isa was our main guide and kind of our spiritual inspiration. By the time he joined us, he was retired from the wildlife division, but agreed to come back to help us. It is because of Isa that we have the spot in Mole National Park that we do. We were being offered various locations in Zaina, in Mole at the time we were negotiating with the government that we weren't really too happy about. And John Mason took a trip to Mole, had been working with Isa for years and said, Isa, where do you think we should go? And Isa said, John, you need to go to Target Range. And he took John to the spot, and it was called Target Range because the area where Zaina is now located was initially the area where all the wildlife rangers and Forestry Commission staff would do their target practice when they were training. So we're on the Target Range site because of Isa. This guy knows more about elephants and has more experience in the bush. He's a pretty old guy, but can outwalk any young fellow in the world, as far as I can tell. And what I love about him is you hear these stories about clean water in Africa and borehole wells and things like that. Well, one of the things you find with these kind of wells is people often, local folks often don't like the taste of the water. So Isa loves the muddy water from one of the springs and streams inside the park. So when he's in the park, he'll take a 5-gallon jerry can and fill that up park with water and bring that home, and that's what he drinks. And it's probably what's made him so strong, mineral content and all of that. But he's an amazing individual. It's one of the things I miss most is experiencing elephants and Mole through Isa's eyes. I'm going to end here with one of my most special experiences. So, you know, when I first went to Ghana, back to Ghana in 2004 to start Zaina, the idea was to do multiple properties. It's something we still want to do, but we're right now still only on the first location at Zaina and making that as special as it can be. One of the hardest parts of doing Zaina was spending 4 years away from my kids. That was pretty tough, but what I was able to turn that into a very special experience was during the summers, they would come and stay with me and we'd do summer camp at the lodge, especially those 2 years where I was actually running the lodge myself. The girls would come. This is Erin and Chloe at a Zaina sunset. And this is also one of the special experiences you get at the Infinity Pool. This is us looking at elephants at Zaina as well. So it's probably one of the things I really miss the most from that time. I'm going to end here. I thank you for joining me. If you've watched this long, you've really put in some time. But I do appreciate your joining this story. I'd be happy through email or other things to answer any questions you might have. Normally, this is the part where I answer questions to our guests, which obviously is not going to work right now. So I want to thank you, and I'm going to end it there. Thanks, everybody.